We have asked for your feedback, and I am pleased to report that listener interactions are picking up, including a fun suggestion that arrived a couple of days ago. More on that as we dive into episode 34 of InGoal Radio, the podcast, a presentation of The Hockey Shop, source for sports Surrey, thehockeyshop.com. I'm your host, Darren Millard, and this week, the gear segment focuses on the great and boundless area of goalie accessories. I'll explain. InGoal Magazine co-founder Kevin Woodley does double duty, cornering Vancouver Canucks goalie coach Ian Clark for an interesting conversation, both for the topics they cover and how this interview is conducted. Woodley and his founding father, partner in crime, David Hutchison, join me now. And Hutch, go to you first. How would you describe Woody's ability to be creative in this area of locking down guests for InGoal Radio?
You have to be impressed by the tenacity of Kevin Woodley, who will go to all lengths to get a guest, whether that means traveling all the way up to Kelowna at 4 o'clock in the morning so he can meet with somebody, or in this case, hanging around the rink till the end of the workday for Canucks goaltending coach Ian Clark, and giving him a ride home so that he can put the mic up and have that conversation in the InGoal mobile studio. I'm just feeling a little bit badly that you've had an interview in your mobile studio. Kevin's had several in his, and all I can claim is that we did one intro to one episode from the front of my Prius while parked at a motocross store in Kelowna, BC. So I got to get a guest into my studio one day too.
Well, the battery causes way too much interference from the Prius for the recording process. That's the situation.
There's also the whole cleanliness factor. Hutch is always ripping me for my car being like spotless, but that comes in handy when you're inviting NHL guests to sit in the front seat.
Well, yeah, so, they roll your way for sure.
Hutch might have to clear out a few fast food wrappers first.
I didn't realize that you were actually driving Clark somewhere, in this case his house. I thought he just jumped in because you guys were looking for a quiet area to do the interview, but it was a full transit.
Yeah, no, I think, and listen, I'm a pretty lucky guy. As we say in the interview, I've got a long time relationship with him. I do sit in his coach's office every once in a while, and he shows me some things and technical elements, and we just talk goaltending. Like it's pretty cool, like pretty blessed to be able to have those experiences. But there was a lot going on at Rogers Arena. The prospects were wrapping up their camp. The veterans were having an informal skate. The last couple of days and over the weekend, they were filming their big intro, the intro they'll come onto the ice to all season, and it's their 50th season. So there was just a ton going on, and rather than me going into an area in that circumstance where I'm maybe not technically supposed to be as a media member, it was just a lot easier to kill two birds with one stone. He needed a lift home, and the rolling InGoal studio went to work. There were a few looks at traffic lights as people tried to figure out why these two guys at the car were each holding a mic and having a conversation. And somebody, one lady was really, really like craning her neck to try and pointing and trying to figure it out. And the good news is she never figured out it was just me, because she would have stopped caring. But it was pretty entertaining.
Let's hope she's from Revenue Canada, and when you write off your mileage, you can say, "Hey, look, this is what I was doing. It's all good."
Hey, I write off my mileage regardless. My wife is my accountant, so it's all legit. I was more worried she'd be from WorkSafe BC, and we were going to get an invoice.
I think you're going to get a ticket for using a handheld electronic device while driving that car.
Yeah, I wonder, does that qualify?
It's unreal what they will qualify to do that nowadays. So.
I wasn't on my phone, boys. I wasn't on my phone.
I'm just trying to. I want a picture of you driving the car holding a microphone.
Don't use the electric toothbrush either. Tim Thomas is in the news for a couple of things. One, he's not going to do really any media going forward. There was a lot of requests and a few people reaching out to him. We've been knocking on his door. The response in reaction to his induction or announcement that he's going to be inducted to the USA Hockey Hall of Fame, Woody?
It's funny. My response was, and you're right. I mean, he has been, he's just kind of gone dark a little bit since he retired. And I was just happy for him to hear the news. I think it's well deserved. I think it brings up a bigger question given, his career started late and maybe didn't last as long as some others, but as good as as good as they come when he got an opportunity in the NHL. So there's another Hall of Fame I think we have to ask about. I guess I understand as a media person that every story that comes out of this induction and the questions center around how his career ended. And we all know how politics and sports intersected towards the end of it. And I'll be honest with you, all I thought about was, as other people discuss that, like how good a guy he was to us. I just wish I could talk hockey with him again. His takes on the position, his willingness to share his thoughts on the position, the evolution of the position, the evolution of his game, equipment. He was as gracious with his time as any goaltender has been with us, and that's a pretty long list of guys who have been good to us over the years at InGoal Magazine. And I just love that opportunity again to talk hockey. He talked about some nervous system issues. Have read some stories about maybe post-concussion symptom. I just hope everything's good in his world because he was really good to us. And so congratulations on the USA Hockey Hall of Fame to Tim Thomas. And hopefully maybe at the induction ceremony, we can hear him talk about the game itself and maybe less focused on how his career ended. I get it as a journalist. That's part of the story, but I want to hear the other stories because there are some beauties, and he tells them as well as anyone.
Total gear geek.
Oh, you know what? And one of my favorite Tim Thomas stories too is the mask. Darren, I don't know if you'd remember this, but he wore a mask for the month of November. It was a Movember themed mask. It was painted by Eye Candy Air. It was sort of, I can't remember, Hutch. Was it our idea? Was it their idea?
Yeah, we started it.
Yeah,
we started
worked on it together.
We reached out to Eye Candy. We reached out to Tony Priolo at Sport Mask, who built that famous mask of his, and then they facilitated the discussions for us with Timmy.
Yeah, so the idea, of course, was to raise money, obviously, for Movember. High profile guy at the time, obviously. Had some ties to it through his dad in terms of wanting to raise money for that type of awareness and research. And I think, to me, the amazing thing was that your assumption when you do something like that, like your first instinct is to do an auction, right? Like the highest bid wins it. That's how you raise money. And Tim, he wasn't into that because that just meant the guy with the biggest checkbook was going to be able to buy his mask. And as much as that could raise a lot of money, he saw a better way, and we ended up doing a raffle. And in his mind, what that meant was you didn't have to be rich to have an opportunity to win this mask. All you had to do was be able to buy a $10 raffle ticket. And I'll be honest, I don't remember what the total was, but it far exceeded what the expectations would have been in terms of winning that mask in an auction. One person winning it with a bit, again, being able to cut a big check. Lots of entries. Everybody had a chance to win it, kind of a man of the people kind of move on his part. And then, of course, being as gracious as he was, I remember him, and we have photos of it somewhere, meeting with the winners after a game in Boston and just taking photos with them. And just, to me, that's another example of a side that not a lot of people saw. Rather than just, hey, yeah, I'll raise money and the guy with the most money gets to win it, he really wanted to make sure fans, if you could afford a $10 raffle ticket, he wanted to give you that opportunity to win that game-worn mask. He went 9-0 with a 941 save percentage during the month of November in that mask, and then game-worn handed it off to the winner of that raffle.
The Mage.
Yeah.
The Mage, and that style of mask, it never did catch on, which we've had that discussion. Why wouldn't it? Because of all the success that he had. So a two-time Vezina Trophy winner, Jennings winner, Conn Smythe winner, Stanley Cup champion, 214 wins. It's not the win total that gets you into the Hockey Hall of Fame. He's not at that level of that magical 320, 325 area, but those other trophies certainly qualify. And then you add in his international experience and a 4-year starter at Vermont. Hutch stepped in and owned that job for his entire career. Like it looked like he was on a great run, but then ended up doing things really the hard way from the rest of the run.
But that's what I love about him and why I think he deserves to be there. I mean, all the accolades, he deserves to be there. I would like to see him there just because he provides inspiration to goaltenders everywhere that you shouldn't quit. He took the road less traveled. He got there later than everybody else. And that's what we all look to for inspiration. And then he didn't just get there, but he succeeded at the highest levels. Yeah, what a great story.
Drafted by the Quebec Nordiques, in case you're wondering.
So
he goes
that.
back far enough for Quebec, and he also goes far enough to have ties on his hockey DB, which is we're running out of those guys. He is personable, and I'm one of those ones where he's as much as we'd love to share everything that happens with Tim Thomas, I would also just walk on hot coals to be in a room and just listen to the guy talk goaltending.
Yeah, like you said, and we've got some of them. We'll highlight some of them on social media here this week. Some of the Q&As we ran with him, some of the conversations we had, why he used straight bars, didn't have a cat eye on his cage, felt that vertical lines were easier for him visually to manage. Just the detail. I've had this conversation with Alex Ald over the years, like one of the most detailed guys he ever played with. And don't forget, like Alex played with a lot of them, right? He played with Henrik Lundqvist in New York. He played with Carey Price in Montreal. And the way that Tim approached the game, thought the game, loved the game, and the position itself was, I'd say unmatched, but it was up there near the some of the biggest names and some of the most passionate goaltenders that we've gotten to know over the years.
So you're back at the hockey shop this week for the gear segment. I have a question for you. As somebody that's at the hockey shop, a source for sports in Surrey, Woody, so you're there so often. When you walk back in after a couple of weeks away, like it was this week, are you looking around for anything that's new or different or catches your eye, or is it just you're so used to just being there, it's business as usual?
Well, first of all, it's like Norm walking into Cheers, for those old enough to remember that one. Just kidding. It's more like, oh crap, this guy's here again.
Here he is.
Oh
yeah.
man.
Hide.
I do. And the funny thing is, and we'll talk about this in the gear segment, there are some new items that have arrived. We are going to focus on a base layer from Oneiric or Oneiric. I'm not quite sure how we pronounce it, but we have reviewed it. We're going to talk about that. That's new to the store. It's a product that we really like. So Cam's going to walk us through that. But there's another little tease here for our listeners to stick around and listen to the gear segment, because there were some pro return sticks this week. And not only are they fascinating and unique, and we're talking superstar names, but you can get them for $100 less than you would pay just to buy a stock stick off the rack for those pro return sticks. So a little tease there. That's why I go to the hockey shop, Darren, because every time I walk in, even when I go regularly, they've usually got some specialty items that I haven't seen before. Not just like the latest and greatest from the top brands in terms of gloves, blockers, pads, sticks, but items like the pro returns. Accessories you mentioned, there are so many different things where they're ahead of the curve. I noticed that they've got the goalie block in stock as well, that little rubberized piece that goes under your index finger on the paddle of your stick to sort of save you if a puck rides up. Saw that at the retail store today for the first time. Even apparel, some really cool t-shirts and some new t-shirts and hats. So if you can get there in person, I highly recommend it. It really is like a slice of heaven, goaltending heaven, that is. An entire floor dedicated to the position at the Source for Sports in Surrey, Vancouver suburbs. If you can't get there in person, make sure you check them out at thehockeyshop.com. It was a pleasure to be back and checking out some of the new things. So stay tuned for that gear segment coming up a little later in the show. And if you have a chance, check it out in person. Like I said, online or in person at the Hockey Shop, Source for Sports.
Hutch, I want to bring you into something that Woody just brought up. What was that? The piece of rubber padding that fits underneath on the goalie block? Do you know what that is? And can you explain it to me?
Yep. We've got one here. Maddie's been using it since the summer when Joel Hofer of the Portland Winterhawks was in a training group with him this summer at one of Eli Wilson's camps. And Joel does a skate, I believe, with the guy who invented the goalie block, and he handed one over to Maddie to use. Great idea, brilliant in its simplicity, and it's just a block of rubber that wraps around the paddle of your stick just below where you would hold it. And obviously, you can put it anywhere you want. The intent is just below where you hold it for those shots that tend to ride up the paddle and into the finger. And despite all the advances in protection on blockers, some guys are still getting hit on the index finger, can have that finger broken fairly easily. So that little block of rubber just sits there and stops that from happening. It adds almost no weight to your stick. Not a super expensive item. To me, it really seems like a no-brainer to have one on your stick. The only caveat I would give just in full disclosure here is it's causing a little bit of discoloration underneath the block. It's just a hard black rubber, and I don't know if there's some sort of chemical leaching from it, but it's causing some yellowing on the stick underneath. Doesn't really matter, but if you're as anal about how your stick looks as Kevin is about the interior of his car, then you might want to think about that.
Yeah, and the other caveat would be, I guess, if you're going to use it and you're in a situation where you actually could end up using a backup stick, you almost got to buy two, because it's not something you can just yank off in 10 seconds while changing sticks at the bench in the midst of a game. So if you really value the protection, you might need it to buy two, which is probably good for the hockey shop. Just buy two.
Yeah.
We did
a few guys I've talked to have talked about just not even using one in a game because they want that standard lighter feel in a game, but they sort of keep it on their practice stick.
Oh, that's a good idea, actually. And we did see it at Net 360. Actually, the early skate I went up to in Kelowna was the first time I saw guys with it. And a lot of those guys were then again at Net 360. And a couple of them, James Reimer was one, Troy Grosnick was another. I liked it enough that they kept it. So I saw it on their sticks for the first time in July, and they were still using it in August. And Grosnick did a little, if you check out our InGoal mag or InGoal magazine on Instagram, he did a little video about it. And funny enough, sure enough, the one drill I was filming of him in August, he took one that caught him just underneath the blocker, kind of a rising shot in tight, and he was turning his hand, and he kind of looked at me, and I think we both knew that he felt like that one, it did save him on it. So it looks like it's a permanent addition to his twigs for the year in the American Hockey League and end up potentially with the Nashville Predators in the NHL.
It's totally legal. You can use it in games.
It's funny. I don't know.
It's never been thought about.
Yeah, I don't know that there's a rule of for or against it. There certainly isn't one against it. And I guess my question would be, there's no advantage other than safety. And I guess potentially, like Hutch says, it's negligible in terms of making your stick heavier. So there's no performance advantage. It's just safer.
I'll reach out to Kay and I'll pose that to him and we'll give you the answer next week. Providing I remember, so I'm putting that on YouTube to remind me to ask Kay to make sure that I get that answer. But there's also a good gear segment for you potentially down the road. So Woody, we've come up with all kinds of content for future episodes here.
Yeah, hopefully let's not talk any more about it. We're going to give away all the secrets.
Okay, let's get into the feature interview. Ian Clark, if he's not the godfather of goalie coaches, he's the first cousin of that person. That's the way I'd describe him. He's been on a journey that's included coaching, private, and both for organizations as well, a stint in publishing, some other media, countless hours mentoring multiple generations of goalie coaches. He's currently the goalie coach of the Vancouver Canucks, but the backstory really needs to be told. And to take us on that journey, we hop in the InGoal Radio limousine and ride along with Woody.
So this is going to be like another episode of Riding in Cars. We started the podcast, episode 1 with Roberto Luongo. Not this car, I got a new ride since then, but riding in the car with Kevin, kind of like a cheap version of the Seinfeld comedians in cars. And this is the 3rd time we've ended up in the car, 4th time, but there's some ties amongst all of them. Alex Auld, I believe, was our 2nd guest in the car. And now our 3rd guest, that's right, is Ian Clark, who, of course, has worked a long time with Roberto Luongo, worked with Alex Auld with the Vancouver Canucks. Clarky, been wanting to get you on the show for a long time. We could probably spend hours. We're limited to about 25, 30 minutes here by schedule. Welcome to the InGoal Radio Podcast. What do you think of our studio?
Love the studio. Great ride. Love the studio. And also have worked in length with Kevin Woodley. So there's a even greater tie.
I think we have to go full disclosure on this one. To be honest, I wanted to have one of our other hosts on this interview, but I couldn't fit Millard in the trunk. And this whole Vegas thing has got him moving just because I feel like we've known each other so long, I'm not sure I have any questions that I don't think I know the answer to. And those can sometimes be the worst interviews. But what, 03, 04, I met you and you introduced me to the world of goaltending through the old Goalie News magazine.
I believe that is correct. And you took it and ran with it.
It's been a fun adventure ever since. So for our guests that may not know the full story on Ian Clark, let's start with Ian Clark, the goaltender, before we get to Ian Clark, the goaltending coach for now, a couple decades in the NHL. You played in a different era, in a different style, and I've seen you bust out the odd practice move, not quite the same way you teach. Well, walk us through what got you, the combined passion is what we talk about here. So how'd you get into goaltending? What made you fall in love with the position?
Well, let me start by saying very clearly, I did play goal. I'm a much better goalie coach than I ever was a goalie.
You started in Vancouver though. So you grew up in, like, this is home for you in terms of growing up. This is your second stint with the Canucks, but this is also where you played minor hockey and where you got your start.
Well, I actually started in Lake Howichan. But then, yes, came here, played for years with Point Grey, Kerrisdale Point Grey. They amalgamated. Spent some time playing junior B locally. Ultimately, as a 17-year-old, went to Penticton, played with the Penticton Knights back in the Brett Hull days, and ended up ultimately playing Canadian College. And really, that was sort of, I was moving into the twilight of my playing career at that point. And but all through that time, really, and you may know the name Vic Lemaire.
Yes.
Vic was one of the first specialized goalie coaches for the position years ago, one of the very first specialized goalie schools. And as a 14-year-old, he invited me to become a part of his staff. And that's where the coaching began. And I never really stopped coaching goaltenders. Went through university, graduated from university, took a job actually here in Vancouver with London Life. Did that for a very short period of time before I realized that ultimately my passion and my desire was to be in the world of coaching goaltenders, and jumped back into it and been doing it ever since full time.
And this is a time when goalie coaching wasn't necessarily, certainly wasn't a common career. Like there weren't as many goalie coaches out there. It wasn't a career path. It wasn't something that I think a lot of people would have looked at it and said, "Hey, this is what I'm going to do," and then at the NHL and at that high level, and this is a way I can make a living. Was that a tough call from there?
Well, at the beginning, as I think a lot of people at the time that wanted to get into this business, it was really more of a goalie school type activity that I was, at least from a career / business perspective, pursuing. And really quite shortly after I started doing that, you end up coaching goalies. And a lot of goalie coaches ask me, what should I do? What should I do? But you end up coaching goalies, and, one or two of those goalies has some success, and, and then, and you end up, in my case, it was, then their agent, because they were playing major junior, their agent started getting interested in this because, as you said already, there's not that many goalie coaches out there. It's pretty limited. There weren't really, there might have been one or two full-time goalie coaches in the NHL at the time. Most teams had consultants, if anything, and a lot didn't have anything. And so there wasn't a huge volume. So all of a sudden the agents got intrigued by this. And the next thing you know, you're working with NHL goalies. And the next thing you know, one thing leads to another, and everything just started snowballing, and here we are.
And the first sort of roll of that snowball down the hill was with the Florida Panthers?
Well, actually, it was Russ Farwell called me up. I was actually working with BC Amateur Hockey in I don't know if you've even heard of the Junior Olympic program. It was called back in the day.
That's before my time.
And it was, much like you see Team Pacific and this kind of activity going on now. And I remember very clearly, clear as day, working in a Soyuz at the Junior Olympic camp. Mike Babcock was the head coach. I was doing the goalie coaching. And, you just start building relationships, you start building network. And to make a long story short, Russ Farwell called me and asked me if I'd be interested in coming down for an interview. And I started with the Seattle Thunderbirds. And that was sort of the first sort of break into the higher levels of hockey. And
How many years with the Thunderbirds before we walk into, or before we get to that first NHL gig?
I'm going to say I was probably 3 or 4 years. I think 3 really. I think the 4th year I was kind of limited because at that point I had probably joined the Panthers. So it would have been, I think, about 1997. And had a lot of fun down there. Great city. It's a great hockey community. They're going to do wonderful, I think, as an NHL franchise.
Okay. And so that's where the relationship with Roberto starts.
So actually, the way it worked out was I was coaching a goaltender, young goaltender, whose name is Cam Ward.
I remember this Cam Ward.
And so it tells you how long ago that was, because of course Cam just retired from a long, very successful NHL career. And I was working with this goaltender named Cam Ward, who happened to be playing for the Red Deer Rebels at the time. His agent was a fellow by the name of Herb Pinder, who was also Trevor Kidd's agent. And so again, for goalie coaches, and they often ask me, what should I do? What should I do? How can I, get this moved off center as far as my career goes? And that was a situation where, one relationship led to another relationship. At the time, Billy Smith was the goalie coach in Florida. And at the time, they had made the move for Roberto, and, I don't even remember why Billy ended up moving on. But regardless, it was a situation where Trevor Kidd's agent knew there was a spot. He presented my name at the time to Bill Torrey, Chuck Fletcher, Dwayne Sutter, and got an interview, and that was that. And that's where that, as you say, the relationship with Roberto began.
And it's funny because around that time, like really a lot of the goalie coaches up until sort of even into the late 90s were been there, done that guys who played in the league. And so guys that hadn't played in the league, what was that like, especially early on, to be a guy who came from a different side of things, who wasn't able to sort of say, been there, done that, played in the NHL, here's my experience. Not so much even just with the goaltenders, but I would imagine within a coaching staff where a lot of them, again, same circles. They played in the league and then they move on to coaching. Was that tough at any point? How has that evolved over the years?
Yeah, and even the locker room, and players, it was and I will make a correction there. I made a comment about, I mentioned Billy Smith. He was prior to that. It was actually Phil Muir at the time that was in there. But anyways, coming back to your question, it is there. That was call it a hurdle, whatever. Your job as a goalie coach, the first thing you're going to do with goalies, whether it's with your head coach, with your general manager, whoever, at the end of the day, a really good goalie coach is a hell of a salesman. And at the end of the day, you've got to gain their conviction in the path you want to take, whether it be the one-on-one with a goalie, and I'm sitting there with Roberto Luongo in my very first meeting, and I need to be able to articulate to him what it's like to work with Ian Clark, and what direction are we going to go, and what's important to me philosophically, et cetera, et cetera. And you need to garner their buy-in for that. And same thing, no different than an interview when you go in and meet with Dwayne Sutter and Chuck Fletcher and Bill Torrey. You're sitting there in front of these guys, and you got to convince them on philosophically the direction that you want to take the goaltending group, and so yeah, I mean, it is a bit of a hurdle, maybe a bigger hurdle than as you say, a guy that's played in the game and has just sort of evolved into to that as the next step in his career. So I think you definitely have to cross that. And then, of course, as time goes on, you build your own resume in that regard, and people can very clearly see the goaltenders you've worked with and the impacts you've had as you move along.
Easier to get by, like, has that process of buy-in changed over the years with that experience, with the expertise, with the reputation? You've got a young goaltender. I for example, when you were hired here, Michael DiPietro had already been drafted, and talking to him for the first time, like, he knew you. Versus you having to sell him like he was eager to sort of get to see what Ian Clark was all about, because he knew very much who you were and what you'd done and who you'd worked with, from Roberto to Bobrovsky and Columbus. Have you had to evolve, or is it still at some level all about building that relationship with a guy? Maybe it's just a little different when you don't have to sell them on anything.
Yeah, a couple things there. Number one is, yes, each relationship is a unique relationship. And at the end of the day, you and your goaltender have to get to a comfort level with that relationship and get to a point of trust, place of trust, and there's a level of loyalty and a level of all those things that come into play in the development of that relationship, just like any other life relationship and strong functioning relationship. So there's no doubt there's that. On the flip side, Roberto once said, someone asked me a very similar question about this whole business of not being an NHL goaltender myself. And I remember vividly Roberto Luongo getting asked that question about my lack of NHL experience. And he said, what are you talking about? He has the same amount of NHL experience I do, because he's lived every game with me. He's sat there, he's lived it, he's played it with me. He has the exact same amount of NHL experience that I do.
Actually, it's a good way of thinking about it. I never thought of it that way. What's that role like at the NHL level? And I guess it probably, again, varies from guy to guy, but how much of it is teaching and that relationship building? How much of it, especially as it evolves, is about being an advocate for your goaltender within your coaching staff? And again, I know all the situations are different, but it's not just about coaching anymore, is it? There's a lot that goes into this job. You're a part-time psychologist, managing sort of expectations within the coaching staff, all those different elements. It's a little more than just going out and running drills, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's there is, of course, the technical / structural, mechanical, positional side of the position that you have to be impactful in. Because, of course, those are things that help streamline your goaltender's performance, provide consistency, etc. At the same time, I often, and I'll use an example with Sergei. Sergei was a goaltender that I coached for going 7 years. And, from a goaltender that was pretty raw when we got him to a goaltender that is obviously highly evolved now. And I went from very much a high developmental role in his game early on as we began to pursue some of the development we did in his game. And then we got to a point where I kind of transitioned. And really my primary job with Bob, obviously, I characterize it two ways. In one case, one side of it was I was kind of his GPS. I was kind of his compass. So if he's going through the course of that grinding, up to 100+ game season, really when you think about the exhibition games and the 82 game schedule and playoffs and everything else. And as he goes through the grind of that season and he goes a little off track, it's very easy for a goaltender, even if they're very knowledgeable about not only the position, but how they play the game, their approach to the position, very easy to get a little bit sidetracked and start heading off, I call it, into the wilderness. And really, it's my job to say, whoa, hey, Bobo, come back over here. We need to come back over here. And so on the one hand, I shifted from a heavy developmental role as we sought to bring more cohesion to what he was doing out there and some more logic to what he was doing out there, to, as I say, this sort of compass GPS type role. And the other role I had was, and you've alluded to this, Kevin, in the with respect to how you deal with coaching staffs and your management group and all that. And that is, I would say to people, my number one job right now is to create an environment for him to succeed. And that includes recovery. That includes making sure their spirit remains high. Can you close the door on today so that you can open the door tomorrow with all the vigor and all the energy and all of, bringing all that emotional energy into it every day, because it's a grind, it's a grinder, and you better have your spirit there with you, and you better have your emotional energy, or you're gonna falter significantly.
Now, do you have to watch, is it about consistency for yourself and being the same, or do you have to really monitor and feed off of them? Are they high? Are they low? And adjust sort of your personality or your outlook to that day based on what you're reading off your goaltender, or do you just need to be consistent as the goaltending coach so that they know they can sort of count on that, regardless of how they feel on a day-to-day basis?
Well, I think it's both. I think there is some consistency issues. And then I think you do have to read off them because it is a grinder and it is a marathon. And there are days that, they're coming off maybe a subpar performance. And there's a day where they've played say 3 and 5 games, And you've got to be able to read off of them and where they're at. I often tell goaltenders part of my job is to regenerate spirit. If they come into that locker room and they've lost the spark in their eyes, and they come in with low energy, physically, emotionally, spiritually, then they're not going to put in not just the work. It's not just the volume of work, but it's the quality of work. It's the attention to detail. They're not going to have, it's partly my job to ensure that great personal discipline that some of these goaltenders have. It's partly my job to provide nutrition for that in how I manage. They have limited resources. And at the end of the day, I have to play a role in allowing them to maximize the resources that they do have.
Can you tell we're in Vancouver? The listeners are going to be like, what is all this? It's like a hurricane outside as we're driving home here. So I apologize for the sound of rain, but folks, that's what living in Vancouver is like, even in September. I want to talk a little bit about the technical, but I don't want to get bogged down in it. There are so many different ways we could go. I think people who know you and know your history know, Goalie News Magazine is how I got into it. Editing your articles is how I learned, sort of developed a passion to even play the position myself. What do you think? I guess the big question would be how do you see the game evolving technically? But it's such a big question. Can you even answer that one? Or the evolution, one of the biggest evolutions in the past 10 years in your experiences?
Well, there's a few questions there.
I tend to do that.
Let's start with where's the position going? For me, and as a coach, just like a player goes through an evolution, they go on a journey. My journey involves working with other coaches, head coaches, assistant coaches. My journey very much involves working with goaltenders, and arguably the greatest evolution in my teaching comes from goalies. As I watch Roberto Luongo go out there and live and breathe goaltending with him every day, or Sergei Bobrovsky, and now Jacob Markstrom. Number one, you're listening to them and you're getting feedback from them, and you're seeing these different minds, these different bodies, these goaltenders with different resources find solutions to things out there, and that sparks ideas in your mind. So that's sort of, that's part of my journey. But I can tell you that as I've gone through this, as you alluded to, 20 years, almost 2 decades in the NHL, I look at the position very differently now. I was very much a goaltender, a coach that was focused on the technical, mechanical aspect of the position. And now I look at the technical, mechanical, structural aspect of the position. Is it getting louder?
It's we are literally there was a flash flood going down the street here. So, but I think technology is going to allow me to keep our levels hot and that to a minimum. Okay. So we'll just keep going because I am hanging off every word here, and I know our listeners will too.
So I look at that, and I've said this to many people. I certainly haven't said it on this podcast, but I'll say it here. Is I look at goaltending, and I really believe that there are 7 key components to elite level performance for a goaltender. And they're kind of big picture items, but I believe it's a goalie coach's responsibility to be able to nurture all of them. And this is where it gets a little tricky, because technique is very, very tangible in the sense that here's the technique. If I do this technique over and over and over again with a high level of attention to detail and high level of quality, I'm going to get better and better at that technique. But at the end of the day, technique is not going to translate into elite goaltending in and of itself. It's just simply not. And so technique is one of the 7 big components. And I'm just going to list the 7 for me.
All right. I'm literally hanging off this.
So these are big ticket items. They're not, and there maybe some are a little ambiguous. But when I say goaltending athleticism, I'm not talking about trained athleticism in the gym. I am talking about the goaltender's natural ability to athletically play the position. Part of that is flexibility and elasticity. Part of that is, I know Mitch Korn would use the word contortability. That was a big Mitch Korn word that I picked up because, of course, you learn from other goalie coaches too. But the ability to use athleticism to support your game, goaltending athleticism, if you don't have it, you're going to struggle to hit the elite stratosphere. Competitiveness. If you're not your team's fiercest competitor, you're going to struggle in putting that full recipe together as an elite goaltender. So competitiveness is essential. There is never a time where our competitiveness isn't, it's always there. And I often use the term with goaltenders, we have to repeat the compete. It kind of has a little rhyme to it because competitiveness is not, it's kind of a general thing. But if you want to get really good at it, you better repeat it. And it better happen in practice. And so competitiveness is, and I'm just saying these things alphabetically, just so you know. Instinctive ability. What is instinctive ability? Can we define that? Well, my definition for that is the ability to break from structure. The ability to find a creative solution under pressure in the moment. And if you look at the elite goaltenders, and I would recommend all goalies go on YouTube and watch, the 10 greatest saves from 2019 and 2018 and some of these saves that, whether it's Jonathan Quick or Henrik Lundqvist or Sergei Bobrovsky, and you watch these saves, these are unique one-off saves. They're saves that you can't actually repeat because you may only ever use them once in your career. And so the instinctive ability to break from structure is a combination of compete and creativity. We then get to, I may go off alphabetical here, but we're going to get to reactivity. If you can only support your inside from a coverage perspective, which of course we see a lot of these butterfly goaltenders that are collapsing down in butterfly, they never get beat through themselves.
Right, that old adage, nothing through you, that's not enough anymore.
Not enough. So the ability to react and to protect your outside equally as well as your inside is an essential piece of the elite puzzle. We then get to, we'll throw out technical. We'll call it technical, call it structural, call it mechanical, whatever you want to do. Okay, that is an important component to it, the recipe. And the other one that is absolutely essential is the goaltender's visual talent. And it is the responsibility, in my mind, of the goaltending coach and the goaltender, of course, to pursue all 7 of those. Now, every goaltender out there has a unique recipe. And that's a challenge because a lot of what goes on out there developmentally with goaltenders is goalies come into a curriculum and they do the same drills and they're asked to do the same things. And at the end of the day, if we go look at the elite goalies of the game, whether you want to look at Tuukka Rask or Henrik Lundqvist or Pekka Rinne or Sergei Bobrovsky or Carey Price or Jonathan Quick or whoever you want to name in this group. Andrei Vasilevsky, of course, is a wonderful young goalie. There's lots of them.
Yeah.
They're all very unique. They all have a unique recipe. This is not a template. There is no template. And so we have to pursue all of these avenues within our game if we truly want to become elite.
You need all 7 components, but not everyone's going to have them to the same degree or the same percentage. So it's a matter of you always want to maximize each component, but finding the right mix for each guy.
Marc-Andre Fleury, for example, may be a guy that has a full cup of technique, but Marty Brodeur only had 2 tablespoons of technique, for argument. But you want to talk about a competitor and you want to talk about instincts and you want to talk about goaltending, natural athleticism. You want to talk about reactivity. You want to talk about reads. You've got Marty Brodeur there with some of the greatest attributes ever to play the game. And you could go and, you look at every goaltender and every one of those recipes is just a little bit different.
Clarky, we're at 25 minutes. I'm a little worried as we part. We've arrived at your house. I'm a little worried with this weather that my car may actually float down the street and into the ocean here. It's raining pretty hard. Can we make this a to be continued? Because I think we just hit the tip of the iceberg. Like those 7 points are that's gold. And I know our listeners are going to love it. I want to talk about your experiences in Sweden because there were a few years between NHL jobs there and just your time in Russia with Bob. So can we call this part 1 of To Be Continued?
We can.
Perfect. Thank you so much for joining us. Like I said, I think we could probably keep going for another 25 minutes, but I think we might need to start building the arc here.
Well, Kevin, it was a pleasure. Enjoyed it, as always. Love talking goaltending, and love the ride. But now I got to get out into the hurricane.
Yeah. I think we might need to find you an umbrella. Okay. All right. Thanks, buddy.
Thank you.
So this is better and great conversation. I just love that you guys were giving us the weather updates throughout, and we just went through Dorian on the east coast of the United States and up into Canada and the Maritimes, and I've got trees all over the InGoal Radio East Coast Bureau. So I thought that was intriguing when you were talking about Mother Nature raining down on you guys.
Now, when Hutch got the audio, he told me as he edited it that he couldn't actually hear the rain, but it felt like at the time, that's why we were kind of pausing and trying to, like, it felt like it was coming through the car.
I could. I was listening
hear it
to
a little
it,
bit.
and
Okay.
yeah, I could. So I'm with you. I'm a little disappointed. I thought your vehicle had better insulation than that for if you're going to have a mobile studio, but we'll let it go for this time.
I'll work on one of the only missing features on the new ride. We turned up a hill to get to his place in sort of the Kerrisdale area, UBC area of Vancouver, and there was so much water coming down the road. It was literally halfway up the tires of a lot of cars, so like on a 20-inch rim. So it's like 10 inches of water through some of the intersections. I thought a pipe had burst, because coming out of Vancouver up into that area, there'd been no rain, and all of a sudden we just hit this. And as I started to go up the hill, like, it was just pouring down these side streets. It was almost like a little mini flash flood, and we're trying to have this conversation, trying not to panic about the fact that it looks like cars are going to start floating towards us down the street. Like, we needed an arc. So it was pretty funny to sort of be having this conversation, driving and witnessing what felt like some type of like weather Armageddon coming down on top of us. So I'm glad the quality worked out okay. That's a full credit to Clarkie's professionalism and ability to keep a mic at the same position. He praised Marty Brodeur for his goaltending style, but if Brodeur was the artist who moved the mic everywhere, Clarkie was the technician that kept it right by the chin.
Yeah, that's a great job. So we have 5 holes in goaltending. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Fifth one between the legs. And 7, what do they call them? Philosophies?
I believe he called
principles.
them basically his keys to elite goaltending. Seven elements that are necessary to be in. I think that's what makes us so passionate about the position. One thing I always say I love, there is no one way. There is no absolutes in the position of goaltending, or there's certainly very few. There are trends and certain aspects that will lead to certain results most of the time. There are very few absolute one way, only way to play the position. And so hearing him sort of walk through those 7 elements in his mind, and the fact they can be mixed to such wide varying degrees was pretty cool. This is a guy who, when you talk about somebody who wrote the book on something, like, he quite literally wrote the book on, sort of the modern butterfly goaltending game. The first one was called From the Crease. You bought it almost like a magazine subscription, and it came with a binder, and as each one came in, it was sort of all done through progressions and stages, and you put it in the binder. And I talk to goalie coaches at all levels now, and a lot of them have that binder. I know some of the biggest names in the game, in the goaltending world, subscribed to that product back in the day. And then where I met him, his magazine Goalie News sort of continued that tradition of technical writing, but in more of just a month-to-month, little micro progressions from one month to the next, but not as sort of a manual. And if I can tell one more story, because when we get him back on, we're going to talk about his time in Sweden. We're going to talk about his ties to Russia, why he thinks Russian goaltending right now, is a place where a lot of NHL teams are looking for the next talent, that blend between maybe too much technique at a young age. All those elements he's got amazing thoughts on. But the story I wanted to share is one that Fred Brathwaite shared with me. When we talk about writing the book in a manual, Hockey Canada sent a group of goalie coaches to Sweden a number of years back. I think Rick Romsley was one of them. Fred Brathwaite was one of them. And according to Fred, and I believe I've actually had this told by Thomas Magnuson as well, when the Hockey Canada group said we kind of, they've got a manual in Sweden, a goaltending manual, and Swedish goaltending was very popular at the time in the NHL, a lot of guys getting drafted. And so people wanted to know about this manual. We've sort of published images from it at ingoalmag.com. And the response, I believe it was from Magnus, and I shouldn't put words in his mouth, but certainly someone on the Swedish side of things said, like, why don't you just ask Ian Clark? Because we based this manual off of his writing. So And of course, Ian had worked for Hockey Canada for all those years. So when I say he wrote the book, I mean it quite literally. I'm not saying that lightly in any way, shape, or form. He really is one of the godfathers of sort of modern technical goaltending.
What a compliment to him.
Yeah, and I don't know if we should share that with him. We don't want to pump the tires too much.
And the fact that you drove him home. Okay, all right, see ya. Thanks for the ride. All right, bye. Goalie coach, which is a great tribute to you too, in having that kind of access. And you're right. We've been talking about getting Ian on here from the very start, and he's one of those guys where you're talking to him every day, so you're flipping around, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But he's also very busy. Hey, just one quick story before we get to the gear segment. You helped out a goaltender at the Canucks Prospects with some of the in-goal demo gear.
Yeah, we like to we parade the fact. We're kind of proud of the fact that we've developed a pretty deep list of equipment testers from a wide variety of backgrounds. Everything from beer league to guys who are playing pro overseas, and in the summers they want to try gear. Like, we make sure when we do a review, we've gotten that feedback. Sorry, a lot of junior A goalies, some major junior goalies. But I got to say, this was a first. Arturs Silovs, who the Canucks drafted this year, signed already as a late round pick. Like, they are big on this kid out of Latvia. He arrived after making the decision not until late August to go play in Barrie in the Ontario Hockey League this year and signing with the Canucks. He arrived to training camp with a set of pads that looked like they went through his entire season last year, CCM E-Flex pads, and they were pretty worn out. And he's facing some elite shooters. He'll be at training camp with the Canucks when it opens on Friday. He was at their prospects camp this week. And so I noticed on the second day of camp, all of a sudden he wasn't wearing E-Flex. He was wearing a set of Premier 2s, which, that's one thing I like about CCM. Two very distinct lines. Very distinct properties between the pads. One all about sort of soft flex and feel, and the other a lot stiffer, at least maybe not in the boot anymore, but from the boot break up, a lot stiffer. And he was wearing Jake Keeley's pads, and he didn't look real comfortable in them. So I happen to mention, we have an E-Flex 4 set that's still in really good shape. Just happened to be in Canucks colors. And sure enough, they took me up on it. And he was out there on the third day of Canucks Prospects Camp in an InGoal magazine branded set of CCM E-Flex 4 pads. And it looks like he liked them enough that he's going to continue them while he waits for his set to arrive for his season with Barrie in the Ontario Hockey League. And I'm not sure if he's scheduled to get into a game. Their preseason opens against Calgary and Victoria on Monday. They are pretty deep in goal this year. You think of Markstrom, Demko, Bachman, DiPietro, Keeley. There's not, and Zane McIntyre, who signed as a free agent in the summer.
Right.
There's not a lot of room at the inn. So I'm not sure he gets an appearance in the preseason, but if he does, it will be an InGoal magazine test pad. So I got to say, that's a first, and that's pretty cool.
That's awesome. Saw the pictures on the InGoal Instagram account and did a double take. What's going on here? So you headed out to visit your buddy Cam again, and part of that experience coming off that was obviously the Henrik Lundqvist product that caught your eye.
Yeah, no, and so there's the tease we told listeners to be waiting for. A pro return Henrik Lundqvist, and I shouldn't say they have it looked like at least half a dozen, maybe some more in the back. 2X Pro stick, and what makes this unique is as we said in our review of the 2X Pro stick by Bauer, first composite stick that Henrik Lundqvist has used in the NHL. He switched over last season after being a longtime foam core guy. And of course, Bauer has made it with that squared off paddle that Henrik prefers. And I've had that conversation with him over the years or in years past about why he has that very unique paddle. He feels like it allows him to present the blocker more square and sort of be more active with the blocker. And so pretty much anyone can now go and buy it from thehockeyshop.com, your very own Henrik Lundqvist, legit pro stock 2X Pro stick with his unique paddle. And because it's pro stock, Cam will explain, it's actually $100 less than you would pay to just buy a regular Bauer 2X Pro off the rack. So those will be up at thehockeyshop.com. They're in store right now, and Cam's going to walk us through sort of the ins and outs of what you get when you buy that in the gear segment, along, of course, with the undergarments.
It's part of the relationship that the Source for Sports, the Hockey Shop, hockeyshop.com has with these manufacturers, and it's why you go visit them and lean on them for all your goaltending equipment needs. It's the gear segment on InGoal Radio, the podcast with Woody and Cam.
Welcome back to the Hockey Shop, Source for Sports, out here in Surrey, British Columbia, the suburbs of Vancouver. You can also check them out at thehockeyshop.com. We're back in the basement this week. We've kind of jumped around a little bit, Cam, brought in some outside voices, but now we're back to the master. Cam Matt Wiv joins us here in what I call a little slice of goalie heaven. We're in the back room today, which means I'm surrounded by all their inventory. I literally look down a hallway and it's boxes like to the roof, all goalie equipment. This is why you come here, because if you need it, they got it. And they got guys like Cam that can tell you what you need to make you a better goaltender. And speaking of that, you've got a new product to share with us today. You guys are now stocking a product that we've reviewed in the past, but now you're going to sell. So nice little synergy there. A new base layer option. Walk us through it.
Yeah, we just picked up the Oneiric base layer pant here for goalies specifically in particular. And this is one where I'll actually have to probably default back to you to be the nerd on gear here a little bit, because to be honest, I don't know too much about it. I just got back in from a week of meetings here. So
Top secret meetings.
Found it on the wall here, and I believe might look to you to tell me about it a little bit here.
Yeah, I've had some experience in it, and I brought a sample that we've been using for our testers, and the feedback's been really positive. So now you can actually take that sample and get it on the ice. I think what a lot of our guys liked was sort of the fact that everything was combined in one piece. So if you're a guy that likes to wear a cup underneath your goalie cup, and we know at the NHL level, 2 cups is a minimum. A lot of guys will even wear sort of 3. It has that built in. You don't have to throw on your base layer and throw on a can and then throw on a goalie cup. It's got Velcro straps. If you like to wear, if your team has team socks that you need to wear under, you're not just a random beer league hack like myself. It's got the Velcro built in. It's got the skate protection, and I think skate cut protection in the lower leg and kind of, through the Achilles and up into the calf. That's a big deal. It's got padding on the backside, which I found, I actually wondered if that might be a little redundant, but it's kind of smart. Again, the back of your legs are an area that can be exposed, the back of your knee. Not you're going to take a ton of pucks off there, but wax, guys digging around for loose pucks, and even the potential of somebody skating over top there, just a little extra protection. And then the other big one that I think guys liked a lot was the knee grip. There's a grip material that's kind of on the outside of the knee. And the idea here is it's there to sort of help prevent your knee pads from slipping down. And what I like if I was to build a perfect pant, it would probably be this. And actually, I should also say the other thing guys liked was there's a bit of that non-slip grip material in the waistband as well. So in terms of how a pant fits and staying secure and not slipping, just having that little layer, that was something that guys noted as well. If I was building a perfect pant, it would be something along these lines, with extra knee padding protection. I was spoiled by the Bauer one, which has obviously been discontinued, but that was one of my favorite pair of pants. Just that extra layer of padding. What I like about this, and this ties into another product you've got on the shelf, that non-slip grip type material on the knee, and it really is effective on a knee pad, would also be effective if you were to buy, say, one of the Bauer padded knee sleeves, which, again, I believe has been discontinued, but you guys have a ton in stock. That'd be a nice combination. And 2 pieces, Bob's your uncle, you've got everything covered. As opposed to putting on a base layer, then adding, a can, then adding knee protection, then adding a cut-proof sock. It really does bring everything into one. And, we've heard a lot of positivity about the breathability of it. It is a heavier undergarment. So as you kind of look at it, you're like, hey, is this going to be hot? But that wasn't the experience we had.
Yeah, it's funny. There's a couple things I keep going back to that grip on the knee there. It's definitely a nice addition and feature.
I don't think anybody else that's basically unique to this undergarment. I don't believe there's anybody else with that feature on an undergarment for goaltenders.
I think another one for the padding on the back of the leg too. If you get bugged by Velcro at all on your current base layer or anything about your straps just kind of wedging into you, this will just give you that little bit of an extra layer in between too.
Like a Velcro knee strap around that's kind of digging in.
Yeah, just to give you a little bit of extra there. So I think that's that might apply to a few folks that come through the door for sure.
Yeah, and I think one of the biggest thing one of our testers wrote in some of the feedback, I think it ties it up quite nicely, is the goalie base allowed me to replace both my Kevlar socks as well as my compression jock shorts, which of course a lot of people wear for the Velcro to pull up, plus the compression to pull up socks, decreasing the amount of time to get dressed and onto the ice, as well as providing an ease of mind knowing I've simplified my gear, less to remember. The added protection in these exposed areas provides additional comfort and ease of mind knowing you're protected no matter what position you find yourself in. And that may sound like an advertorial, but that's actually one of the feedbacks of one of our testers who plays at a pretty high level. Actually, back in Ontario, guy's done some writing for us. And so that's kind of, that's what we like to do with our tests, is get it out into as many hands and not just echo what the company says. But in this case, I think a lot of their claims hold up. So congratulations to the Hockey Shop and the Hockey Shop Source for Sports for adding yet another good item to the inventory list. And make sure all the goalies can check it out online at hockeyshop.com. And if they got any questions about sizing or anything like that, Cam, where can they get you?
At 604-589-8299.
Okay, now we talked about this. We talked about the knee sleeves. I happen to know a couple NHL goalies that might be interested. I already sent a text to one, might be interested in picking up some of your excess stock of knee sleeves. This is what I tell you, folks. These people understand goaltending, so they stock up on items that get discontinued, and now you can get them at the Hockey Shop. But speaking of unique items, I walked in and I'm like, oh, hold on. We're going to go away from the base layer right now. I'm like, is that a Lundqvist and a Dubnyk 2X Pro? Is that like Lundqvist with the actual cutout of Lundqvist? And
in a composite stick.
In a composite stick. And of course, if you read our 2X Pro review at InGoalMag.com, you know that Lundqvist switched to a composite stick last season after years and years of using a foam core. The 2X Pro was the one that finally got him to switch. Cam, you've got Pro Return here, and anybody who knows the sort of famous square top on the handle that Lundqvist uses, they've actually got that exact model. It's an actual Lundqvist stick available at the Hockey Shop and on sale. How come a Lundqvist model stick is $100 less at $199 compared to $299 than an off-the-rack 2X Pro stick?
Pro Return.
Okay, so Pro Return. I think we need to let our listeners know what Pro Return means. The difference here is it's not warranty, right?
That's correct.
So no warranty on it, but you can actually get a Henrik Lundqvist, like built for him stock stick with that unique grip at the handle, 2X Pro from thehockeyshop.com at $200 right now, Canadian. You've also got a Dubnyk model, but this one, in addition to sort of being the tan to match his tan pads for special games, so a unique color, it's skin 2X Pro, but you got to know in this case, same price point, $200 instead of $300, but it's not an actual 2X Pro. That's a skinned NXG.
That's correct. Yeah, so a little bit of a different stick. I mean, if green's your thing, like, yeah, but it's a little bold.
Hey, listen, some goalies want to be bold. If you've got any green, if you've got any green in your team, and if you're a goalie that wears a retro gear like a tan, that's hot. I'd be stocking up on that one. And the Dubnyk, because again, like these are not sort of, hey, we're going to bring it in every size, because they don't make it in every size. These are literal Pro Returns, which means they are the actual sticks. So in Dubnyk's case, it's a 25.5-inch paddle, as I said, an NXG, skinned as a 2X Pro. And in Lundqvist's case, I believe Henrik is a 25-inch paddle, again, with that very unique sort of grip at the top, at the shoulder. We'll have some pictures on our social media later today. I've talked to Henrik about what he likes about the way his hand fits on that grip and why he goes that way. So we'll roll that out at InGoalMag.com and InGoal Social. and you can check it out at thehockeyshop.com. Like I said, on sale. Looks like they've got maybe half a dozen, maybe a few more in the back of each model. So your chance to basically get Henrik Lundqvist stick and at a discount. Just the caveat, it's a pro return twig, so there is no warranty. Kem, what the hell, man? Couple weeks off and I did all the talking.
It was all you. I'm getting replaced here slowly, eh?
I mean, yeah, I guess maybe. I don't know. You're in trouble. You're in trouble. All right. But you keep bringing in stuff like this and inventory like this and unique pieces like the base layer from, I pronounce this brutally. Give me the proper pronunciation.
Oneiric.
Yeah, I hope that's right. He's cringing as he says it. I don't know how to say it. I do know it's a good product and another example of why I shop at the Hockey Shop and thehockeyshop.com, because these guys bring in products that are going to help goaltenders. Cam, thanks. We'll catch up again soon. Hopefully fill me in on some of the secret things you learned during your travels to see all the manufacturers of late.
Story for another time.
Fascinating idea, because it gets away from the socks. You should still wear socks, protective socks, guys and girls listening. But the fact that I keep losing my socks sometimes leaves me without. So this piece of apparel and equipment is a great forefront, not just a backup to protection, but leads the way. Hutch, no brainer for you.
No brainer, because I don't wear socks. Even
really?
Yeah, I know. I could never get used to them. So this is really a nice way to compromise. I believe in them. I can see there's a huge advantage, but yeah, just never got used to it.
Wow, you are our dad and just throwing caution to the wind and living so carelessly.
Well, somebody's got to be old school and not care about safety, right?
I'm very disappointed, Woody. I mean, this is a shock to my system right now, knowing that Dad is irresponsible.
Yeah, I'm pretty close to speechless, and I think we're 34 episodes in. We know that doesn't happen very often.
Yeah.
No, it doesn't.
Speaking of episode 34, Hutch, we got a great little email just from somebody saying, why don't we do little tie-ins to each episode number relating to goaltenders and who wore that particular number. This is episode 34. He mentioned John Van Beesbroek and was one of the first people to use just a piece of equipment that's on a comeback, and the glove underneath the glove.
Well, gosh, yeah. Now you got me speechless because I don't have the email in front of me, and I feel really bad because it's nice of a reader to send in a good idea, and it was a great idea. The suggestion being, whatever episode number we're on, we should use that as a jersey number and come up with a fact about a goaltender who wore that number, and he wanted it to be something maybe just a little bit less known, a little bit more obscure. And I believe the suggestion was that John Van Beesbroek wore number 34, today's episode number, and that he was the first to wear an extra glove under his trapper. I don't know if that's true or not, but I'll take him for his word. And what interesting attribution.
Number 34. When I throw that at you right now, Woody, who's the first number 34 that currently plays in the NHL that jumps to mind?
I got to be honest, the first one that jumps to mind is probably James Reimer, because I think he had to switch, only because, he's a guy that we've worked with and built a relationship with in person over the summers, but also because it's timely because he had to switch, right? He's going to Carolina. I believe he's swapping over to 47 because Peter Mrazek was already number 34, and that reminds me, I forgot to send him a note asking why 47. I'm sure
I was about to ask you that question.
Yeah, we will find out soon enough.
John Graham is the guy that, when you talk about 47, wore number 47.
Wow, that's impressive, Darren.
Thank you. Then, you know what?
There's an obscure factor all on its own. Good
job.
Totally.
That is a Don Taylor level of jersey reference. And now we're going to have to next week explain who Don Taylor is for people not in the Vancouver market. But that is up there, Darren. That is impressive.
Better get a John Graham cameo at episode 47, please.
Oh, I've talked. John has some good stories because after his career ended in the NHL, there was some time in there was a stint in the KHL, and I've heard a few of those stories. There's some beauties.
John Graham during the Stanley Cup run, a couple of stories during that year as well, and why Nikolai Habibulin ended up being the guy, and Donnie Taylor, the golden boy. That's what we call them from Sports Page and Sportsnet days. Thank you, guys. This was a lot of fun. Episode 34. We will track episode 35. Tom Barrasso, Tony Esposito, a couple of Southpaws there for you. For Kevin Woodley and Dave Hutchison, I'm Darren Millard. I hope you enjoyed listening to our conversation with Ian Clark and, of course, Cam from the Hockey Shop, source for sports Surrey, thehockeyshop.com. If you have any reactions to this, tips, comments, or just viewer feedback, Hutch, where should they send their feedback?
I believe any questions, feedback, ideas, suggestions to podcast@ingoalmag.com.
And don't forget to rate us. Give us a like on your particular podcast provider. Training camps are open when we next talk to you. We look forward to bringing you the latest and the greatest from the goaltending world, both on the ice and in the pro shops. Bye for now.